everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Killeleagh Show. This is our first live episode of 2021. And I'm here today with one of my favorite people on the planet. Our guest is Jaclyn Dugan-Roof. And let me tell you a little bit about why I brought her here, and then I'm just going to let her take it away because really she's got so much to say that I want to give you the stage, Jaclyn.
Sounds good to me.
Here's the deal, you guys. For those of you who don't know me, I started this show about 4 years ago because I just felt like having recently become a new mom, everywhere I looked, there was a lot of news about, doom and gloom on our planet. And I looked around me and there was so much beautiful stuff going on. I lived in Seneca Falls, the birthplace of women's rights. And no one was really talking about the good stuff. Right? And I just wanted another platform, another space to be able to just highlight people locally, people all over the place who are just doing great work on our planet. And as time went on, it evolved into really focusing on people who are also into values-driven living and values-driven businesses, and continuing on that idea of just focusing on sharing the people who are doing so much great work out there. So recently, we started to accelerate the podcast a little bit because I was just doing once a month back then, and now we're getting into like a once a week format. And as we do that, my intention is to really step into 2021 to, let's face it, guys, 2020 shook us all up a little bit. So we're going to walk into 2021 and start to shake things up a bit. So even the things like, last year I was learning all different things about women in politics and how we're supposed to be so uniform in how we present ourselves. And I was like, hey, nobody's seen me in a ponytail on my podcast before. Let's do that, right? Because I'm tired of all the same old rules. I want to break them this year. I want to have a whole new paradigm. I want to have a shift in how we approach this life because we only get one go around that we know of. And I want to live it as best as I can. So Jaclyn came to mind for our first episode of 2021. And of course, I could have showed you what Jaclyn looks like when she is her powerhouse self, dressed to the nines, doing her thing, which you can see us all doing that all the time. But I want to also show people behind the scenes. And this was so great because here she is. She's not in her house. She's traveling in Florida. She's in her parents' garage. And this woman really just stole my heart years ago. We met online. And then discovered that we had a mutual friend in Seneca Falls. Who was our mutual friend again? It was Susie, right?
Susie.
Yeah. Okay. And so she came out to Seneca Falls, hopped in a car with me, and we drove to an event out in the Berkshires together in Massachusetts, having never met each other before. And from there, we have partnered up in business. We have become great friends. I would say sometimes we're kind of like advisors to one another, like keeping each other in check with, the things that we're doing in our life, because Jaclyn's specialty is really helping people harness their most badass self. Let's just put it that way. And there's so many different components of it that I wanted to bring her on because I want to talk about all the different ways that we can step into our most authentic self in 2021. And we can do that using the kind of model that Jaclyn offers. So Jaclyn, I would love for you to share one of the things that I love, which is your 5 Bs of Badassery, and talk a little bit about where this came from for you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Yes, I am in a shed in Florida on a makeshift ladder thing, holding my phone. I don't even know what I'm doing. Clearly, I'm in vacation mode. My hair, I'm from northern Michigan, so my hair is not used to this Florida humidity quite yet. So I'm like, yeah, that's how that's going to work. So yes, you guys get me super raw today, so which is fun. And same thing like you said, I just want to show up. And I was like, do I wait until I get back to Michigan where I'm in my element, kind of do my thing? I kept kind of putting Melissa off. I'm like, no, I don't really know if I want to show up. My kids they're somewhere with my mom and my sister. And I'm just like, you know what? Let's show up. Let's show up in the middle of a shed in Florida and share my 5 Bs of Badassery. Because I agree, 2021 was pretty much an ass kicker for many people. But for me, I feel like even too, it was really, there's some really good points and there's some really low points. And I feel like that's how a lot of people feel. I feel like overall 2020, we're all like, I'm not even sure what happened. I'm not even sure.
Where did it go even? I don't even know where it went.
I just told my mom that the other day. We're like, it went by really quickly. It seemed like March and April a little bit of May when everything first happened, we were all like, this is going to take forever. Kids came home from school and I'm like, I'm not cut out for this. Like, it seemed like it took forever. And then once it hit, I was like, where did the year go? So I feel like in talking to people, a lot of folks feel that same way. But it was a lot of time too, to kind of that inner reflection. How do I want to show up as my authentic self? And I'm like, oh, this is glorious. This is a beautiful, beautiful thing, depending on your perspective of it. I know that some people had some hard times. I get it. With work and business stuff. I mean, my background's coming from business development, so I'm like feeling for all the small businesses. Like I'm like the biggest cheerleader. I'm like, man, that was a rough patch for sure. But hopefully it's turning. So like you said, hopefully we're shaking things up in 2021. Yeah, I'm confident we are. It'll take a lot of, I think a lot of intention. I think that's what's been the most challenging, is that we just kind of get in this mundane routine. And we just go and we do, and I'm a doer, I get it, and you just kind of get in your pattern. Hence why I was like, I don't know if I want to go in a shed in Florida, do a podcast, but why not? But then it's like this intention. What's the intention behind it? I think that's been a challenge for a lot of people, including myself. What is the actual intention? And what do I actually want to do versus what I think I always should do? So I think that's where kind of the badassery comes in. I get a lot of people saying like, oh, I wish I could be as badass as you. I'm like, you are, we just got to unleash it. I'm kind of bold. I'm out there. It just comes naturally for me. I've always been like that. And I think the ideas of the badassery for me started because my history, my background is in politics, is in community development, is kind of in this idea of fitting into a mold that most people have formed for me. So my whole life was it was all planned out. And then one day I woke up and I'm like, okay, this doesn't feel good. What does it look like? I actually took the time to then lock myself into a cage and train for a cage fight. And that's when it kind of broke loose for me. So not everyone needs to lock themselves in a cage by any means. That's not what I'm saying. But for me, it was kind of that turning point where it was like, oh man, like I have this outward portrayal of badassery, but inside I was dying. I was like, everyone's like, you're so confident. I'm like, I'm probably one of the least confident people you'll ever meet. But it took all that inner work for me to actually embrace it. And to be like, I am badass, and that's okay. And that's not just an outwardly appearance. I mean, I have blue hair, I'm pretty muscular, I'm pretty bold, I'm pretty in your face when I want to be, but there's also this really beautiful side of me that I've discovered, and I really want people to kind of embrace this whole approach, where you can be beautiful, and you can be inner, and you can just be, which is really nice. You don't have to always do, which is really, I think, the most beautiful piece of it. I think that's the most badass, is when people can just be who they are. So that's kind of where the 5 Bs of Badassery came from. They've been kind of developing over the past few years. What the first 5 I started off with are not the same 5 that they are now, which I think is really fascinating to me. Like looking back, I'm like, yeah, of course it was very badass stuff. And what, every kind of that stereotypical badass, what are the things you think of when you think of someone who's badass? Right. Now I'm like, all like, no, but part of it is your being. Yeah, right? Yeah, total beast mode. Like, raw in your face. And I'm like, no, that's not just it. There's a whole nother piece of it, which is the beautiful side of it. So that's kind of where it came from. I was just tired of fitting in the molds. I was tired of being like, oh, this is how I should be, how I should look. Like you said, women in politics. That was a very, very interesting process for me to watch very influential females in my life, to then go, but I don't want to fit that mold. Can't I just be a little different and it's okay? No, I don't know if it's okay. No, it is. It is okay. And it's okay for me to embrace my badassery. And that's a beautiful thing for me. So that's kind of where it came from. I don't know if that answered your question at all.
Absolutely it does. And this is the thing that I love. It's like, I think whenever we walk into a new year, or anything really, like starting a new program or getting a new coach or anything we're about to embark upon, we can look at a big picture, like these 5 Bs that you have, and get really overwhelmed and go like, I can't do all of that, right? But the beauty of what you have to offer, and I'd love for you to share them all with us, is you could pull one thread from one of them and work on that. And then the next month, pull one thing from one of them and work on that. And over time, it will contribute to that concept of like, it's like in a community, the rising tide will raise all boats, right? But it's like that in our lives too. If we find something we're drawn to, if we find something that captivates us or that excites us or brings us joy, and we're like, I want to work on that, then we know that just following that path is going to improve our lives exponentially. And the other thing that I love, Jaclyn, about what you share is it doesn't subscribe to the model that a lot of people out there do, which is, that somehow we're broken and we've got to be fixed, and somebody else has the answers, right? Now,
Yes.
that's a little bit hypocritical, because you do help people with this journey, but you're not teaching them that you're the one with the answers. You're teaching people that they are the ones with the answers. Here's some areas to look at, and here's some ways that you can begin to pull it apart and enhance your life. So
Sure.
Let's talk about.
I think that kind of, that's where I've struggled, in all honesty. I've struggled in the quote unquote coaching world. A few years back when I started kind of this coaching journey, I'm like, what do I do with myself? We had just moved from Illinois to Michigan, and I left all of everything I kind of built, kind of my empire, right? I had kind of left that behind. Well, I totally left that behind. My identity, who I was, everything I had worked years and years for, to then move to Michigan, which is fine. It was, a family decision. We moved for my then husband's job, and I'm like, great, a whole new community, and I can discover who I want to be, and I can actually be me, and I don't have to fit into this, again, the mold that this community has developed for me. Because my mother's been in politics for years, and I was following in those footsteps. Everyone, like I said, already had it planned out for me. So I thought, oh my gosh, I'm finally fucking free. Like, I can do what I want. Who do I want to be? Who do I want to show up as? And I went and dyed my hair purple and shaved it into a mohawk. So if that doesn't, again, I'm a go big or go home kind of person. It's just my personality. I've embraced that over the years. But I just feel like at that point, I had the decision. I finally had a decision to make, what do I want to do with myself? And although it sounds really awesome and very freeing, it was super, super scary to me, because I was like, oh man, it's just going to get really uncomfortable. I don't have this planned out instruction manual of what my life looks like. And it took a lot of time to just be like, what do I want to do? How do I use my skills? All that stuff. So I went into coaching naturally. I like to help people. I have that natural inclination. I like to, teach people, all that good stuff. But then I started to find that when I started to get into it, I started feeling disconnected for that exact reason, because I had so many people reach out to me like, what are the 10 steps I need to do to this? I'm like, if there were 10 steps that you only had to do these 10 steps, I would be a fucking bajillionaire at this point, because it doesn't work like that. Like, let's take a step back. And I don't know, can I ask you a question? And people were like, wait, you ask me questions? Like, don't you have all the answers? I'm like, I'm not a guru here. Like, I'm just a normal human being trying to go through this thing called life as well. So it's this whole, like, I started to feel a little bit of that disconnect of like, why are people looking to me for the answers? Like, I'm just being me, and I'm just sharing what's worked for me, that then people can sort of take and alter. Because I don't take anything someone says in stone that it's going to be absolute for me. Yes, there's some things that work, and then there's some things I'm like, that doesn't resonate with me. And that's the beauty of it, to me, where you can kind of pick and choose. So yeah, same thing. You can kind of pick one of the 5 Bs of Badassery, which I'll share. Like, you can just pick one out. Like, what do you need to work on? And the fact that anyone can just take a second and go, actually, I think I might have the answer. I just need some guidance, or I need some cheerleading, or I need a resource, or I need whatever it might be. I need this in order for me to be me. Doesn't mean that, Melissa, you're going to need the same exact thing. It doesn't mean that the person on the street is going to need the same exact thing. They might be similar in nature, but it's not cut in stone, not cut and dry. If it were that easy, again, I would have figured this shit out by now. Just saying, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be exploring my own life. So I feel like that's where I think people get hung up, is that there's like this end all be all. And I think that's where we also, as coaches or people in that industry, get a bad rap too, right? Because once it doesn't work, people are like, well, that doesn't work. You're full of it. Well, no, because you didn't adapt it to how it works for you. There's like, you're still human. You can still do your own thing. Like, do your own stuff, people. So that's where I get kind of like that passionate, like, find out what works for you and stop doing all the other bullshit that people give you. Like, I'm just like, if I can just preach that and just like go on my day, I'd be happy. I'd be happy as a camper. So yeah, I feel like that's where we get so hung up on it in all actuality. Or I don't know, showing up in your parents' shed in Florida. Like, well, I can't do that. Hey, does it get my message out? Sign me up. I'll do it wherever I can.
Right.
Once I get over the fact and the fear of people see me in Florida heat, no makeup and crazy hair and all that in a shed, but it still gets my message out at the end of the day. That is my intention behind it. So I think that that's where we just get so hung up on it.
Right. And how many people are served by that message, right? It's like when you and I were talking about like this transition of moving from 2020 to 2021, like more people need to hear what you have to say. So
well, thanks.
Tell us what
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay. 5 Bs of Badassery. Let's get to it. Okay. So I'm going to do a quick activity with you if you want to participate.
I love it.
All right. So I want you decide, because again, I like options. I'm an options kind of person. I don't know. Options to me this past year, my life has been presented with so many options that like, I'm like, oh, that's what it feels like to have options. So I like options myself. So if you're down for it, you can do this activity with me.
I love it.
All right. So you're going to decide whether or not you want a closed fist. Do you feel, so this closed fist, do you feel like you're standing in your badassery? You're like ready to fight. You got this shit down, whatever it might be. Or you can have your hand open. So you're open, you're kind of like, I'm not really sure what's going on. I kind of feel like in this receiving stage of life, there's all these things coming at me. I don't feel like super what people consider to be confident, like you're just ready to fight. Okay, so you decide whether you're a fist or an open hand, and go ahead and put it up for me.
I'm gonna be really honest with you. I'm kind of like this.
I knew you'd be like that. I said the same thing. I'm like, what would I pick? A fist or an open hand? I'm like, kind of like funky. All right. So let's start with, okay. So let's start with our fist then. I'm just going to tell you what to do then. So start with your fist. I think that resonates more with people who are at the first of the year. They're like, I got this. I got my goals set. I know what I want. 2020, whatever that did for you, whether it was good, bad, indifferent, I'm ready to hit that new year. Everyone feels like super, you see it at the gym. You know, I work in a gym. And you always see like the influx of people and they're always like, yeah, I'm ready to go. And they're all ready and stuff. So we're going to go with fist today.
All right.
All right. So maybe take your fist.
For the record, 2020 was not a bad year for me, right? 2020 brought a lot of gifts wrapped in sandpaper.
Amen to that. Yeah. Amen to that. I
don't mean to downplay. A lot of people lost a lot of things. They lost,
yes, they
lost careers. They lost a lot of stuff. And I don't want to downplay that. But for the record, just so people who are watching know where I stand with my fist up.
Yes, I'm with you. 2020 was an interesting year. Very interesting. I feel the same way. Wrapped in sandpaper, some good, some bad. I got a divorce in the middle of it, so that tells you anything. Yeah. I'm kind of feeling like kind of in between as well. But we'll go with this today. All right. So your thumb, the foundation part. You need those thumbs, right? That's what makes us human as opposed to other primates. So your thumb is your foundation. This is going to be your brain. So the first B of badassery, these can really go in any order, but we kind of start with our mindset. So
I have to keep my fist up the whole time?
You do.
Okay.
Power to the people, right? So if your brain, your mindset, if you feel like it's in a good place right now, like you're like, I got mindset down, I don't have to work on it, you're going to go ahead and keep it closed. If you need to work on it, you're going to go ahead and open it. Okay?
I can always work on mindset.
Perfect. Then open up your thumb. Okay? Next one, the next B of badassery is your body. So maybe you have some goals around your health and wellness. And I don't mean just moving your body, although I'm a physical person. I like to obviously, I like to fight stuff. I like to hit stuff. But even to your wellness, meaning nutrition, how you're showing up, anything like that with your body, if you need to work on that, go ahead and open them. Okay? Third one is your brand. So the third B of badassery is your brand. And what I mean by that is you don't necessarily have to have a business per se. Let's say maybe you work somewhere, work for someone, whatever it is. It could be an entrepreneur, you could be an employee, whatever your life looks like as far as brand. What I mean by this is how you're showing up in the world. So how you're showing up as a business owner, how you're showing up as an employee, me as a mom, whatever, as a partner, whatever it is. How are you showing up, and is it authentic to who you are? If it's something you need to work on, then go ahead and open up that finger. Okay? All right, your fourth one, that little one is your boundaries. your boundaries, if you got to work on boundaries, and I don't mean just boundaries with other people. I think this is where a lot of people get confused. They want to lay down a shit ton of boundaries for people and be like, no, 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 or I'm not going to tolerate this, I'm not going to tolerate that, whatever it is. It's a beautiful thing. But I also want you to think about boundaries with yourself. It could be boundaries of how you're showing up, you know, how you're waking up every day, your routines. It could mean what kind of, you know, talk you're saying to yourself, what you're putting into your body, anything like that. Boundaries need to be set. You need to work on that. Got to open it up. Okay?
Got it.
Your fifth B of Badassery. This little tiny one, but so, so, so important. So important. This is the one I think people forget about. The pinky's always kind of a funky one to people. I think they forget they have a pinky finger sometimes. I have a really funky pinky toe. So too much information for it. But this is going to be your being. So this is how you are going inward. Your spiritual life, your self-respect rituals, as I call them, your just the time that you take to be. If that's something that you need to focus on, that you need to embrace, especially going into 2021, super, super powerful, often forgotten about, go ahead and raise it. All right, so if your hand is open, these are all the 5 areas that you need to work on somehow. Again, there's no cookie cutter way to do it. There's always resources out there. Maybe start with one. Maybe if you're like me, you have, let's say you have your mindset you got to work on, but your brand is cool, but your body is important. I got boundaries down, and maybe I need to work on my being. So these two, brand and boundaries, I can put aside for now. Because again, like you said, it doesn't have to be everything all at once. Pick one. If your hand is completely open, start with that mindset piece. Hands down, no pun intended. Start with that mindset.
I'm gonna start here.
I'm with you, right? I like to start here because this is my brand. This is the most comfortable for me of how I show up is super comfortable for me. But my mindset, that foundational piece, if your hand was completely open, we need you to start with that brain, the first B of Badassery.
Yeah.
All right. If you had your hand open and you started to put it down and your hand was in a fist, but you had some that weren't quite down, those are the areas you need to work on to get all the way into your Badassery where you can actually get some shit done. Those of us who had a fist to start off with and ended up like this, that means we need to be in a state to receive much, much more. So we can't always be like this. This looks badass, you guys. It's not always badass to be in this mentality, in this position. It works when it works. Sometimes you gotta be like this.
Yeah, you know, it's fascinating to me because it ties in so much, Jaclyn, with some of the areas that I've been working on this past year, which is like the integration of masculine and feminine. And when I talk about that, you guys who are watching, ladies, gentlemen, this is not about gender, right?
Sure.
This is about the traits and qualities that we embody as a human that make us well-rounded. And as a single mom, as a business owner, as someone who worked in finance for 10 years, I operate in my masculine a lot, right? That very like outward, go get them kind of energy. And so, you know, for me, that's a lot of this, right? When you can do this is when we're really also taking on that feminine energy, that receiving energy, that energy that is like expressive. Like I'm over here, I'm like this, right? But it's mostly because I want to wrap my arms around people, and damn, I really do. I need a hug, right? Like it's been a long time since we've been able to.
I know, right?
And I'm a hugger.
I'm a hugger too. Believe it or not, most people are like, wait, you're a hugger? I think that's what we get so bent on, being like this all the time. Everyone wants to be, again, it's that, how do you define badassery? And everyone's like, yeah, badass. But then I'm like, no, but the beautiful thing is when you can do this, whatever season of life. So sometimes I'm like this. I could be like this for a month or two, and then I'm like, okay, start at least, and then I'm like that, and then I'm back to this. So I think that's where it gets so individualized, is that figuring out, do you need to be like this? Maybe there's some boundaries that need to be set, or a relationship that needs to end. I was like this last June. So when my process started with my divorce, I was really like this from like March to June. And then once I hit June and I was on my own, I started to feel this happen. Mm-hmm. And I started to receive because I was being more inward. But then I went back to this because I needed to, because boundaries needed to be set, because my life had totally changed. And now I'm back. So it's kind of this ever evolving, you're going to fight or you're just going to receive. And it's there's not one way or the other that anyone needs to be at. You don't need to be like this all the time. If you're like this all the time, it's going to be horrible for you. First of all, your back's going to hurt. Because when you're trained in boxing, your back punches over. So let's avoid bad backs. But then too, it's nice to just be able to receive and then go back and know that those pieces can make you up where you need to, and you need to fight, then you can release. It's all part of the process. That's the beauty of it in my mind.
And that's what I really hope for this year. I hope for everyone to really just embrace the process as we walk into 2021, realizing that, you know, it sounds so cliche, but it's so true. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey, right? And the more we can be open and vulnerable and in that receiving space, but also able to ebb and flow between all of the energy that's needed to engage in life in a meaningful and authentic way, we will walk into this year healthy, happy, resilient, right? And that's the other thing too, is like when we stick with one way or the other, we become attached.
Yes.
Right? We become attached to being the fighter or being the receiver. But the reality is, the less we can attach ourselves, the more we can detach and just be aware of the ebb and the flow and the changes and the shifts that are needed in order for us to move through life with ease and grace. The more fulfilling life becomes. Yes. Right? Because when we're attached to one particular thing, then again, we're doing the same thing that you talked about when the people around you, the life that had shaped you, put you in that cage, right? Put you in that mold. We do that to ourselves when we become overly attached to one thing. So it's good to be playful, right?
Yes.
And able to go back and forth. I love using my hands a lot to talk, by the way. I spent a lot of time in a lot of Italian families.
It's all good. I love it.
Yeah. So
and I think that is, like you said, just the flow of it, and then figuring out what's going to work for you. I say that a lot. I feel like I've been saying that for a couple of years. So just take a second and figure out what works for you, what lights you up, because what lights me up, my badassery is my badassery. You can't have my badassery. It's mine. So when I do have people like, how can it be more badass? How can I get some of your badassery? I'm like, you can't have it. Like, I protect that shit. That's mine. Let's figure out what yours is, and yours is going to look different, and that's the beauty of it. It's just, we need everyone. Yes, I want everyone to stand in their badassery, but I also want everyone to figure out what that even means for them.
Right.
That's the most, like, I do not love any more than someone who shows up authentically as who they are. May not be exactly what I want for them or how I think it should look, and then I go back to that should in the cookie cutter mold, and then I'm like, hello, I'm like preaching this to people. Why am I doing this to people? So that's just the beauty of it. It's the whole beauty of it. Figuring out what works for you.
Listen, I think your camera just gave us the cue. It said, we're done for today.
It's okay.
I promised you. I said, you know what?
This makeshift ladder. See? That's my makeshift ladder.
I love it. And I promised you, I want to take 20 minutes just to kick off this year right, share some amazing stuff with people who are watching. I'm grateful for you, Jaclyn. You are amazing. If anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best place to reach you?
JaclynRoof.com is my website. And even on Facebook, Jaclyn Dugan-Roof. Either way, I'm out there being much more intentional with what I'm putting out into the world. So we'd love to connect with anyone it resonates with, or just want to say, yep, I'm embracing my badassery. It's nice to know that I'm at least encouraging people, inspiring people to do their thing. Own your shit, people. Own it.
I love it. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Get in touch with Jaclyn if you want to learn more or just see more of what she's doing out in the world. But as we walk into 2021, let's all just make a commitment to ourselves to be our most authentic selves, to be showing up in our truth, to be showing up in our lives in the biggest, best ways we possibly can. And again, sometimes that doesn't look like, you know, being Pollyanna. Sometimes that looks like, you know, walking through the dark night and struggling through some stuff. But at the end of the day, as long as we are owning that shit,
correct,
you will come out on the other side and you will be better for it. So
agreed. And much more badass.
2021, let's shake it up.
Love light badassery for me.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.